We want to welcome you to another episode of our podcast, Together on a Journey of Hope, as we explore Assisi and follow in the footsteps of St. Francis, St. Clare, and almost St. Carlo Acutis. So, Bishop, we started our day off at the bottom of the hill at the Church of Santa Maria degli Angeli, where we saw one of the churches that St. Francis rebuilt, but also where St. Francis died. What was it like to celebrate Mass so close to the place where the Franciscans celebrate the transitus of St. Francis into heaven?
Well, it was really a special moment, and our altar that we celebrated Mass on was in the shape of the tree of life, and the crucifix that was there had the tree of life and the crucifix incorporated into it with the corpus on. And I really think it just sort of reminded us all that as that was the place of Francis's transition from this life into eternity, how, especially as we're in this Lenten season, getting ready to celebrate Holy Week and the Paschal Mysteries, of how here at Assisi we see that sense of peace lived out and experienced in the life of a man who was about peace, but reminded us that all peace, and even eternal peace, is centered in God. And to be at that place where he made the great transition from this world to the next as an instrument of peace was really proud, and had me a lot thinking about the need for peace in so many parts of the world today.
And I think also we see in that church Francis's literal idea of rebuilding the church. And of course, we're on this pilgrimage and bringing this pilgrimage to you to, in a way, metaphorically rebuild the Diocese of Greensburg to have a more experiential catechetical spirit. Kate, what was your experience of that powerfulness of the message that Francis received from Jesus?
Well, for me, the life of St. Francis has always been so powerful because it wasn't so much about what he said, it was how he lived. It was his witness in which he preached the gospel. And I think that's a really good message for all of us, those in faith formation, but every single one of us in the Diocese of Greensburg, that, it's how we live. It's the way that we live. It's the way that we treat one another. It's the way that we share the good news and the joy and the hope that we have in Christ by our lives and not just by what we say.
And so from the place where he died to his actual burial place, the Basilica of St. Francis, being in the three layers of that beautiful basilica, what resonated with you, connected you to the man St. Francis?
Well, for me, it was beautiful to see especially all of the frescoes that portray the life of St. Francis and how they so beautifully articulate the poverty, chastity, and obedience, the vows that they profess and live by. And you can see that in the art, and how for St. Francis, by following those virtues, it gets you into heaven, and that's really gorgeously articulated in the ceiling, especially in the basilica, and that was very powerful to see.
And Bishop, you got to bring the pilgrimage cross and lay it on the tomb of St. Francis.
Right. I was saying, of course, here we've seen so many tombs of the apostles, the martyrs, and so many of the saints. But there was something about the tomb of St. Francis that always moves me. It's so beautifully done and so simple but elegant but powerful. But particularly as I laid that cross on the steps of the tomb where you could see his stone sarcophagus of which his body is in, it really represented, as we talked earlier in our podcast about the layers of Rome, you could see the layers where his tomb is on the more primitive layer, which is then directly above is the first church, and above that, the basilica. And he is in perfect perpendicular repose to the altar. And so there he is in repose, but certainly in continuity with history and the celebration of the Eucharist.
From the basilica, we then walked the way of St. Francis to the Church of St. Clare, where we were able to see her body as well. And of course, she's one of our incorrupt saints, that did not decay after death. To see Francis and then Clare together, reminds us of the working of men and women together in a journey of faith. So, Kate, would you talk about seeing one of the most powerful women saints that we have in the church?
Absolutely. And I have a great devotion to St. Clare, especially for her love of the Eucharist. And that was really powerfully portrayed. But what especially struck me here this time was that interplay between St. Francis and St. Clare, that communion between them where he went out and shared the gospel. And that could only happen because she and her community were there praying for him behind him. You can never separate that missionary discipleship from that intercessory prayer. Then that was that beautiful interplay between the two of them that is just lives so powerfully here in Assisi.
And then in that church we saw the San Damiano cross, which was the cross that spoke to St. Francis and where St. Francis received the stigmata, the wounds of Christ in his hands and his feet and his side. The powerful moment of seeing that, Bishop, and being there in prayer, what did that mean to you?
Well, the San Damiano cross is probably one of the most familiar and most often replicated images of the crucifix. We see it everywhere. And looking up and seeing the original, after seeing so many times replications of that, was very powerful. To look and to see and to think about the antiquity of that cross and how it has remained there for centuries really was very moving to me. But to think that I was gazing upon the same cross that St. Francis of Assisi was praying in front of when he heard Christ tell him, "Rebuild my church." And as we know, he took that very literally at first and was literally starting to rebuild churches that had fallen into physical disrepair. And it was only after he had accomplished what rebuilding to that the Holy Father said, you need to rethink this. And he realized that Christ was reminding him to rebuild the spiritual foundations of the church.
And rebuilding the spiritual foundations of the church today is Blessed Carlo Acutis. And we were graced with the ability to see his body again, incorrupt, in a glass tomb in the old cathedral of the diocese here. To have a millennial saint, what does that mean as Bishop of the diocese and seeing the youth respond to that?
Sure. Earlier today, before our podcast, literally, I was interviewed by the Associated Press, who's here at Assisi doing a documentary in anticipation of Carlo Acutis' canonization, which is going to be happening after Easter at the end of April. And they asked me that question, why is Carlo Acutis important? And I said, for a lot of reasons, but primarily he is the first millennial who is going to be canonized. And I think in a real way, he speaks to the young people because he, like so many saints, is someone who people can identify with. I think not only the young who see him as the patron saint of the internet, who laid out, had his Nikes on in a glass sarcophagus with his blue jeans. You don't see many of the saints in repose that way. But that was wonderful. But also, I said, his devotion to the Eucharist and his cataloging of Eucharistic miracles is something that people of all ages also are drawn to. And so I think Carlo Acutis has a draw not only to the young people, but to so many. And I think being here in Assisi, which is a place of reform and renewal, he fits in perfectly.
And I think that there's a lot of people talking, Carlo was only 15, and that he really didn't do any miracles. He didn't walk on water or anything like that, but lived the typical teen life. Kate, for being a catechist and working with young students, what does that inspiration mean to you, but also to the way in which we all are called to become saints?
Well, and I think that's what's so beautiful about Carlo is that he didn't do anything extraordinary, but he did the ordinary in extraordinary ways. Just the ordinary with great love. And he took what his passions were, things like, video games, the internet, soccer, and he did them with love. And he did them for Christ. And I think that really resonates with our young people. I know as someone that, works in sacramental prep, Carlo appeals to them because it shows all of us that We don't have to walk on water or do any of those things, but we can sit in silence with the Lord in the Eucharist, which is what we learned here that Carlo did so very, very often in the Basilica of St. Clare, and prayed and then took that Eucharistic devotion and lived it in his life. And I think that is just a beautiful message for all of us, a reminder that we can do all of those things in our own lives.
Yeah, he was a young man of prayer, but also a young man of action.
One of the things that Vince and Kate that really intrigued me is our tour guide was saying that one of the things Carlos did is he had a great connection to the poor. And of course, here in Assisi with St. Francis and St. Clare, we know what they did in regards to their religious charism and also their outward apostolic witness. She was saying that Carlo, as a young man, once he had become a teenager, received for his birthday and other gifts money. And it was not uncommon that he would take the money that he received and would go and buy sleeping blankets for the poor and the homeless and would give money to support the needy. And boy, here in Assisi, when you think about there's St. Francis going out, working with the poor, St. Clare embracing the charism of poverty and really bringing that mendicant tradition to the church. Carlos, here he is in the 21st century, doing exactly that charism of Francis and Clare.
And from the newest saint of Assisi to the oldest saint of Assisi, Saint Rufino, and being in his church on the top of the hill and seeing all of the episcopal coats of arms, what did that mean to you, Bishop?
Well, again, the antiquity of the church, the heritage of the church, and the richness of the church's tradition. And also, we think about the heart of the church beating for the people. It is the heart of Christ. And there in that church was the heart of Carlo Acutis, that relic of him in the side altar. And so it really reminds us of how Christ has to be the heart of all that we do. And if we do it well, he, as the great antiphon to the Sacred Heart is, make our hearts like to yours.
And of course, at the heart of what we're doing here is prayer, and at the heart of the church is prayer. And we're praying for all of you. We've received your prayer intentions. We hope that you'll keep sending them in at petitions@dioceseofgreensburg.org. We also look forward to your questions, and you can email them there as well. But to be in Assisi and be in this place of prayer, we definitely felt connected with all of you back in Greensburg. And we look forward to a retreat day tomorrow where we will be praying for all of you. So we look forward to that conversation because we are together on a journey of hope.